"You're too old for him. You look like a rag, all worn out." The words, uttered with a chilling smile and a look of contempt, cut through the dining room air like a sharp blade, tearing not only my dignity, but also the illusion of a perfect life I had so carefully built. In that instant, the floor seemed to vanish beneath my feet, and the world around me dissolved into a blur of distorted colors and sounds. It was David's 45th birthday, my partner, and I, Eleanor Vance, at 52, had planned every detail of that evening to be memorable. The dinner in our elegant home on the outskirts of Boston was an intimate celebration, with the table set with the porcelain china I inherited from my grandmother and the aroma of roasted beef filling the air. David, my David, the man who had rekindled the flame of my life after years of solitude, was beaming, and I felt complete by his side. Chloe, my 26-year-old daughter, sitting opposite me with her perfectly styled blonde hair and a silk dress I had bought for her myself, observed the scene with calculated coldness. She had always been the apple of my eye, the one to whom I dedicated every fiber of my being after the complicated divorce from her father. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every postponed dream, all for her. And now, there she was, her voice laden with a venom I never imagined could come from her mouth, delivering such a cruel and personal blow. David, who had been chatting animatedly with a family friend, froze, his fork halfway to his mouth. The silence that followed was deafening, filled only by the echo of Chloe's words in my mind. Too old, rag, all worn out. I felt a flush rise to my face, not from shame, but from a rage that burned in my veins. My heart, which moments before had overflowed with love and gratitude, now shattered into 1,000 pieces, each shard carrying the pain of betrayal. The disappointment was a cruel and personal blow to my happiness and dignity. I looked at David, searching for a sign, a reaction, anything that could alleviate the humiliation. He seemed paralyzed, his eyes fixed on Chloe, who maintained a victorious smile. In that moment, I realized that the wound was not just from the words, but from the silent complicity that seemed to hang in the air. The evening, which should have been a hymn to joy, turned into a stage for my deepest pain. But amidst the devastation, a seed of determination began to sprout. If my daughter wanted to destroy me, she would discover that I was made of much tougher stuff than she imagined. From that moment on, my pain would become the instrument of her downfall. If you're feeling Eleanor's pain, if you've ever been betrayed by someone you least expected, hit like and subscribe to the channel to follow this journey of overcoming and justice. Your story might be the next to be told. My life was never a fairy tale. From an early age, I learned that resilience was not a choice, but a necessity. At 25, with Chloe freshly born and a broken marriage, I faced the world with the determination of a lioness protecting her cub. I worked 2 jobs, studied at night, and with every dollar saved, I built the interior design agency that now allowed me to live with comfort and dignity. It wasn't just about money, it was about proving to myself and to the world that a single woman could build an empire. Chloe was the center of my universe. Her every achievement was my victory, her every smile, a balm for the scars of the past. I spoiled her, yes, but I always tried to instill in her the values of hard work and honesty, the pillars that sustain me. David entered my life 3 years ago, like a ray of sunshine after a long storm. He was a university history professor with a quiet charm and a sharp intellect. His love was mature, respectful, and he saw in me not the woman who had faced difficulties, but the strong and inspiring woman I had become. With him, I learned to laugh again, to dream of a future that wasn't just about surviving, but about thriving. He taught me that age was just a number, and that true beauty resided in the soul and in experience. Our house, once a solitary refuge, transformed into a vibrant home, full of deep conversations and contagious laughter. I believed that, finally, I had found the peace and happiness I so deserved. Chloe's betrayal, therefore, was not just an attack on my person, but a desecration of everything I had built and valued. The girl I carried in my arms, whom I taught to walk, to read, to dream, now saw me as an obstacle, a worn-out rag to be discarded. The pain was excruciating, a mixture of grief and fury. But behind the facade of a loving mother and successful businesswoman, there was a silent strength, a cunning that I had developed over the years to navigate a world dominated by men and challenges. I was not just a wounded woman, I was a strategist. And Chloe, with her youthful arrogance, had underestimated the depth of my capacity to fight. My pain at that moment did not weaken me. It sharpened me, transforming me into a weapon forged in disappointment and the determination to seek justice. The night after David's birthday dinner was a torment. Chloe's words echoed in my mind, mingling with the image of David's paralyzed gaze. I couldn't sleep. I got up and walked around the house, the silence of the early morning amplifying the anguish in my chest. How could my own daughter be so cruel? And more importantly, why? The answer I knew was not simple. Chloe always had an ambitious side, a thirst for recognition and status that at times worried me, but I always attributed that to her youth, to the pressure of modern society. Now, however, the coldness in her eyes and the cruelty of her words told me that something darker was at play. My mother's intuition, which had never failed me, began to scream. Something was wrong, something I had ignored or minimized out of love. I began to revisit memories, conversations, small incidents that at the time seemed insignificant, but now fit together like pieces of a macabre puzzle. I remembered how Chloe always gravitated towards influential people, how quick she was to discard friendships that no longer served her, how she managed to manipulate situations for her own benefit, always with an innocent smile on her face. I had seen this in her past relationships, in her career choices, but I never imagined she would be capable of using this manipulation against me, her own mother. The shadow from her past, mentioned in the thumbnail, began to take shape in my mind. I had to find the evidence, the concrete facts that would reveal Chloe's true face. I remembered a casual conversation with an old college friend of Chloe's who had mentioned that my daughter had a history of questionable ventures to fund her lavish lifestyle. I began to scour old files, emails, even Chloe's social media, looking for any clue, any evidence that could unravel the web of manipulation she had woven, and that's when I found it. An old email, dated a few years back, from a digital marketing company Chloe had consulted. The content was vague, but the attachment was a detailed spreadsheet on how to optimize the image of public figures, including strategies to neutralize authority figures who might pose an obstacle. And on one of the lines, a name made me freeze. Eleanor Vance, mother. My daughter had indeed planned everything. My pain turned into relentless determination. I had the proof. And now she would discover what happens when you underestimate a wounded mother. The revelation of David's passivity and the implicit acceptance that Chloe saw him as a good catch solidified my resolve. It wasn't just a matter of personal humiliation, it was a battle for my dignity and for the truth. The image optimization spreadsheet was just the tip of the iceberg. I needed more, something undeniable that would expose Chloe's true nature. I remembered the phrase in the thumbnail, a shadow from her past came back to exact a bloody price. That shadow, I knew, had a name, Diego. Diego was a name Chloe rarely mentioned, always with an air of disdain, as if it were a youthful mistake. But I remembered him, an ambitious young man with an easy smile and eyes that seemed to hide secrets. He had been Chloe's first serious boyfriend in college, a relationship that ended abruptly, with Chloe claiming he was a loser with no future. However, something about the way she spoke of him always seemed forced to me. I began my investigation. I used my contacts, my network of influence in the business world, to unearth Diego's past and, by extension, Chloe's. What I discovered was shocking. Diego was no loser. He was a promising entrepreneur who had built a tech startup that, after a period of difficulty, had been sold for millions. And most interestingly, the sale occurred shortly after his relationship with Chloe ended. Delving deeper into the research, I found old university newspaper articles and online forums that spoke of a scandal. Chloe had been accused of sabotaging Diego's startup, leaking confidential information to a competitor, all to force him to sell the company at a low price, from which she, in some way, benefited. There was no concrete evidence at the time, and the case was hushed up. But now, with the spreadsheet in hand and Chloe's motivation so clear, everything fit. I had her shadow from the past, and it was about to exact a price. I gathered all the newspaper clippings, the screenshots of old conversations, the documents linking Chloe to the sabotage. My daughter had built her career on the ruins of another person's life. And now she was trying to do the same to me, but I would not be a victim any longer. With the evidence in hand, the pain gave way to a calculated coldness. I didn't just want revenge, I wanted justice. A public, undeniable justice that would expose Chloe for who she truly was. And for that, I needed a stage. David's birthday, which had been the scene of my humiliation, would now be the scene of her downfall. But it wouldn't be a quick fall. It would be slow, painful, and meticulously orchestrated. My plan began to take shape. I would not confront Chloe directly, not yet. I would use her own weapons against her: manipulation, image, public perception. First, I needed to ensure David was on my side, or at least that he wouldn't be an obstacle. I confronted him again, this time not with anger, but with a calm that disarmed him. "David," I said, showing him the evidence of Chloe's past with Diego, "do you really want to be with someone capable of doing this? Someone who sees you as a good catch to be won over and not as a partner?" His eyes widened as he saw the documents, the coldness in his face transforming into shock and finally, deep shame. He realized he had been as manipulated as Diego and that Chloe was willing to destroy anyone in her path. With David, now a reluctant ally, I began to sow the seeds of doubt in Chloe's social circle. Small conversations, accidents with forgotten documents, anonymous emails with links to old articles about Diego. All done with the subtlety of a spider weaving its web. The goal was simple: to make people start questioning the impeccable image Chloe had built. Social media, her favorite playground, would be my battlefield. I had access to a network of influencers and journalists who, for a price, would be willing to investigate Chloe's meteoric rise. Diego's story would be the starting point, the shadow from the past that would come back to haunt her. I didn't just want her to lose David, I wanted her to lose everything: her reputation, her career, her carefully constructed image. The destruction would be complete, and she would be the architect of her own ruin. The game had begun, and I, Eleanor Vance, was ready to play. Eleanor's web is closing in. Do you think Chloe deserves what's coming? Leave your opinion in the comments, like, and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapters of this story of justice and retribution. David's birthday, which Chloe had tried to turn into a stage for my humiliation, would now be the setting for her own downfall. I had planned every step with a surgeon's precision, ensuring that the truth, once revealed, would be undeniable and devastating. The party, held in one of Manhattan's most exclusive ballrooms, was filled with influential figures from New York society, including investors, journalists, and, crucially, some of Chloe's former college classmates, whom I had discreetly invited. David, by my side, was visibly tense, but his determination to see justice done was palpable. He had spent days reviewing the evidence I had collected, and the shame in his eyes was a silent testament to his initial complicity and his regret. Chloe, stunning in a designer dress, circulated through the room with her usual confidence, oblivious to the web closing around her. She smiled, toasted, and accepted compliments, the embodiment of the image she had so meticulously constructed. The moment I had been waiting for arrived during David's speech. He, his voice thick with emotion, began by thanking everyone for their presence. But then his eyes met Chloe's. "And of course," he said, his voice gaining an unexpected firmness, "I want to thank my dear Eleanor, who taught me the true meaning of loyalty and character. And unfortunately, she also opened my eyes to the manipulation and falsehood that can hide behind a pretty smile." A murmur rippled through the room. Chloe paled, her smile faltering. It was then that one of the journalists I had contacted, an investigative reporter known for his relentless stories, stood up. "Mr. Vance, with all due respect, that mention of manipulation reminds me of an old case involving a tech startup and a certain Chloe Vance. Could you clarify if there's any connection?" The room fell into a deathly silence. Chloe tried to interject, but David, with an apologetic glance at me, continued, "Yes, there is a connection, And unfortunately, it's a story of betrayal and sabotage that Ms. Chloe Vance knows very well. In that instant, a video began to project onto a strategically placed screen. It wasn't just any video, it was a compilation of the evidence I had gathered: newspaper clippings, coded emails, anonymous testimonies from Diego's former employees, and even excerpts from that image optimization spreadsheet with my name on it. Chloe's image, once so impeccable, began to crumble before everyone's eyes. The stage she had chosen for her ascent became the setting for her downfall. The video on the screen, with the soundtrack of shocked murmurs and indignant whispers, revealed Chloe's hidden face. The images and texts exposed her manipulation, her greed, and the coldness with which she had destroyed Diego's career for her own benefit. With each new revelation, the air in the room grew heavier, and Chloe's face, once so confident, twisted into a mixture of shock, anger, and despair. She tried to deny it, gesticulating frantically, but her words were lost in the growing commotion. "That's a lie! A setup by my mother!" she screamed, pointing at me, but her voice sounded weak and desperate. No one believed her. The guests, many of whom were public figures who valued reputation above all else, looked at her with contempt. The journalists, eager for a story, recorded every detail with their cameras and recorders. Chloe's image, the marketing prodigy, crumbled in real time. David, with an expression of deep sadness but also relief, remained by my side, a silent testament to the truth. He had chosen loyalty and integrity, even if it meant exposing his partner's daughter. Amidst the chaos, Chloe attempted a desperate escape. She ran towards the exit but was intercepted by one of the security guards. There was no aggression, just a firm restraint. "You can't do this to me," she screamed at me, her eyes full of hatred. "I'm your daughter." I stared at her, my voice calm and firm, despite the pain I still felt. "You called me too old, a worn-out rag, and tried to steal the man I love. You reap what you sow, Chloe." The words, spoken publicly, were the final blow. Chloe collapsed, not from physical pain, but under the weight of public humiliation. She had been exposed, unmasked, and her carefully constructed image was in tatters. The shadow from her past not only came back to exact a price, it completely destroyed her. David's birthday party, which should have been a moment of celebration, became the epitaph of Chloe Vance's career and reputation. Chloe's downfall was swift and spectacular. The news spread like wildfire, and the marketing prodigy became the unmasked manipulator. Her company lost clients, her contracts were canceled, and her image was irremediably tarnished. She tried to defend herself, claiming to be the victim of a family conspiracy, but the evidence was overwhelming. David, for his part, was praised for his courage and integrity. His reputation at the university and in academic circles was strengthened, and he became an example of ethics and honesty. Our relationship, though shaken by the turmoil, emerged stronger, built on a foundation of trust and mutual respect. For me, Eleanor, the victory did not bring the euphoria I expected. There was a deep sadness for the loss of the daughter I loved, for the illusion of family that had shattered. But there was also a sense of peace, of justice served. I had protected my love, my dignity, and had shown Chloe that character is worth more than any ambition. In time, the dust settled. Chloe disappeared from public life, and news of her became increasingly rare. David and I continued our lives more united than ever. I learned that true love is not about perfection, but about acceptance, forgiveness, and the courage to fight for what is right. A year later, David and I were sitting in our garden watching the sunset over the Boston skyline. He held my hand, his eyes full of affection. "Eleanor," he said, "you are the strongest woman I know." I smiled, feeling the gentle breeze on my face. Life had taught me hard lessons, but it had also given me the opportunity to rediscover my strength and the true value of love. Chloe's shadow from the past had exacted its price, but it also paved the way for a more authentic and happy future for me. My daughter's story reminded me that sometimes the greatest pains lead to the greatest discoveries, and that justice, even if delayed, always finds its way. and that a mother's love, however wounded, never completely fades. If you were moved by Eleanor's journey, if you believe that justice always prevails, hit like, share this story, and subscribe to the channel for more narratives that touch the soul and make us reflect on the true value of family and character. What part resonated with you the most? Tell us in the comments.